parameters.
Exactly.
So
because
it's
when we
very
go and
powerful.
look at things like CRP or interleukin-6, they're more of acute inflammation. And actually, we should define what inflammation is because, we use this word inflammation, but there's I heard you say in one of your interviews, you don't even like calling it inflammation because it's very different than the inflammation. We have the picture of in our heads of maybe twisting your ankle and it's red and it's swollen and it's hot, and that's inflammation, right? But we're talking about systemic chronic inflammation here that we're measuring. Can you just give us a bit of a difference between acute inflammation and sterile inflammation and what that is?
Yeah, right, definitely. What we know from the textbook, redness and it gets warm and it's swollen. Those are cardinal signs of acute inflammation after you've suffered from an infection or cellular stress, right? That's acute inflammation. There are well-established markers. Some of them you alluded to, interleukin-6, CRP. So currently, the most savvy cardiologists out there are using CRP to detect, suspected infections.
No,
they're not using it
it's
for cardiovascular disease anymore.
Yeah. It's random.
It's not strong. It's not accurate enough early on cardiovascular events in the future. So I think there's a need for better markers of chronic inflammation. Acute is very well defined, as I mentioned, right? And there are well-established markers for chronic inflammation. And it's age-related. This is like fighting a ghost, right? Because in a way, there's no such thing as an infection. When you're raising your inflammatory levels as you get older, it's largely due to the environment, to the way we treat our bodies, the pollution in the air, the quality of the water, the presence of plasticizers and plastics in the food, and all sorts of hyperglycemic foods that's highly inflammatory, having a poor microbiome diversity and richness of the microbiome is also associated with high inflammation. And so it's basically the environment is fighting a ghost. I like to say, that's why, measuring is so key, but calling it inflammation, it may be.
Yeah, and that's why I like the term sterile inflammation from infection. And it's really the question, which is the chicken and which is the egg scenario. Like, does the inflammation cause the aging or the aging cause the inflammation? Both would be the answer.
Yeah, it is both. We have data to show that it's both. So with aging and no exposome factors, so say a sterile culture of organoids, you still see signs of aging that are expected to see in a living organism. Okay. Now, we also know that when those aspects of aging, like inflammation, start to increase with aging, but just a natural aging, those are causing accelerated aging as well. So the more that increases, it's a vicious circle. Exactly. It starts with aging. Just because you're breathing, you're aging, right? And then you produce inflammatory biomarkers, pushes senescent cells to produce more, and that activates a whole inflammatory cascade that basically doesn't stop and doesn't get resolved. This other idea is like, can we push and maybe boost the resolution of inflammation? The resolution of inflammation is not a inactive process. It's a very active process that requires a lot of energy, a lot of ATP. It comes largely from polyunsaturated fatty acids of the long chain from sources, omega-3, call it EPA and DHA. Those mediate the resolution of the inflammatory response. And again, if you don't have, and most of us are deficient.
I just interviewed someone on that, exactly on that topic, Dr. Michael Lewis, who's an expert on fish oil.
But that basically, results a reduced resolution phase of the inflammatory response and sustained inflammation.
And I've worked with lots of people with brain injuries, and we have the initial injury where you have the tearing of the axons or the actual physical injury, but then you have the biochemical cascades that happen in the days and the weeks even afterwards. And I've gone through it with my mum, of course, who had the aneurysm and stroke. It's that's actually, if we can stop as fast as possible, lower that, I interviewed Dr. Michael Lewis, who's a fish oil expert last week, and Dr. Dayan Goodenow, who's a plasmalogens expert, which is, another type of fatty in the membranes of the cells that help with this as well. And there are a number of other things. I've interviewed Dr. Barry Tan, who's a tocotrienols or vitamin E scientist, and all these things can help reduce the inflammation in the brain or in the body, and all of things are going to be beneficial if we can lower that inflammatory cascade or after COVID, or after a virus, or after whatever the insult is. Yeah. If we get the body back to homeostasis afterwards and get that inflammatory load down, but that becomes more and more difficult as we age, and we have more from the baseline, more of the steroid inflammation, and then less of an acute inflammatory, which is counterintuitive, and not a, but it isn't, but it is.
Yeah, totally. So, it's interesting because on the one hand, the resolution of the inflammatory response depends on a sufficient amount of omega-3 fatty acids in circulation, but also if you're consuming high amounts of omega-6 fatty acids that are empowering the inflammatory response, then even if you're taking your 2 grams of omega-3 that you require a day, you may not be in balance. And so there's also a reduction and cutting on all the sources of omega-6 that you could, possibly do, as in the right. So if you can cut on the omega-6, and many of those are kind of counterintuitive, right? Like nuts and eggs and avocados, so things that we believe are super healthy, but they're also rich in omega-6, and we should try to maintain low levels.
Yeah, because most of us are around the between 18 and 25 to 1, the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. And we should be 1.5 to 1, or
exactly.
So I'm actually doing high dose protocols with fish oils, 9 grams a day and things like that, to really try to saturate. If I'm working with someone with brain injuries, for example, that we, the protocols that are really high dose, as well as other things like fatty 15 and plasmalogens and other things that I use, but that are all in that same sort of class, if you like. And this is just one, but this is a powerful intervention, right? And this is the thing with this age clock, that if we can measure this in a really, quick fashion, and do this successively over a period of months, and we'll get much more people committing to a protocol, because they can actually see it. Like, the moment I can take my fish oil, I don't feel any different, right? I didn't feel anything different from, last month when I wasn't, or whatever. And so it's a hard sell to get people to stay the course, because they can't see the progress that's actually happening on a cellular level, and everything's actually happening on that cellular level, if you like.
Well, that's exactly the place that we want to target. When it comes to tissue and organ level, it's too late, right? So we want to target things where they're early on, exactly as you're saying, at the cellular and molecular level, but you don't see that, you don't measure them. So you're absolutely right. It's true. To ensure patient, I think it's absolutely key to see results and to be able to study them as much as possible with different biological aging markers. Inflammatory age is one that obviously we believe, based on the research we've done, that it's a. But there are other markers as well. I mean, for example, heart rate variability measured by a wearable device. It's a pretty good, marker of risk for cardiovascular conditions, for example. And that may be indicative and somewhat right. And but again, I think the fact that we have proteins in blood is very powerful. We can relate that to foods, exposures, and so on. And we can even move the needle. I mean, we've done quite a few clinical studies now and
Wow.
testing different interventions. And we have a reduction in inflammatory age in some of the studies in a double-blinded placebo-controlled trial that we published in the Nutrients Journal in 200 individuals with a decrease in
Absolutely,
inflammatory
and
age.
this
So
is
it is
really, really
actionable.
exciting. So, when is this clock coming to market commercially, and when can I get it for my clinic? You know, like how far away are you from actually having this available, and for clinical trials, perhaps too, if we wanted to be involved?
Yeah. So for in the US, this is going to be,
Cool.
it's already happening with different clinics and longevity doctors and concierge medicine, wellness centers, most the elite healthcare, because this is a out of pocket for now test. And we are in the pilot phase. We did a beta and an alpha, and we're planning to expand pretty rapidly during 2025, so next year. And very likely in 2026, we'll be able to expand to other countries. So today, if you want to send me your serum, and you can ship that, no
Oh
problem.
wow!
We've
Really?
been sending samples all
Okay.
over the
So
world.
that's doable now,
Initially.
really.
Oh yeah. So we can for
Yeah,
as
yeah,
an
yeah. But if we
research
did
use only at the
wanted to do a
moment.
study or something, we could do that.
With
Yeah,
you
yeah.
as a partner. Yeah. We did it for more than
Wow.
1,000 samples. University of Bordeaux
Wow. Okay,
and
that's
Toulouse
exciting.
in France. So if you send me your serum, we can
Oh
estimate
wow,
your inflammatory age
that's really
today.
excited, and roll on the other stuff so that we can actually get it in all the clinics around the world, because I do think there's going to move the needle that once people understand what it is that you're doing, because it's quite a shift and it's an educational piece, and this is why I think podcasts like this are actually really important to get the message out and the word, and to slowly start to get to hopefully take control.